G'day. This is the first of a series. In each of them I'll be looking at just a short story from my life, things that have happened, things that I've taken part in, things that I find interesting or amusing about parts of my life. This one's sometime mid-60s to quite possibly early 70s maybe. It concerns my mother. Mum, by that time, was potting. She was making pottery. She was part of the group of people that had gone through what they referred to then as tech, we would now call TAFE, a pottery course. At the time there was quite a strong group of strong women involved in the Newcastle visual arts scene. Some were painters, some were sculptors, printmakers, potters, various different media. Some of it came about because of the Von Berto galleries with Anne Von Berto, started up in the early 60s, and showed not only local artists' works but also works from the Boyds, all the well-known names of the art world. It was a very different kind of thing to what a lot of my friends were brought up with, being involved with the visual arts scene. It was sort of like a bohemian vibe to it, I suppose you'd say. As part of that, Mum used to host dinner parties. She always loved cooking and she always liked socialising with friends. So she would have these dinner parties and there'd be 8, 9 people would be there. At these gatherings, they would be all, in a way, bohemian women artists. Some were single, some were married, but their partners didn't come to these sort of events. And I always remember the kind of vibe to it was that very bohemian thing. They'd all be dressed very differently to the mothers of my friends, who were usually quite conservative. These women were anything but conservative. Quite a lot of them smoked heavily. Some smoked pipes, some smoked cigars, some smoked. At Mum's dinner parties, there'd quite often be people sitting in the lounge room, sitting around smoking the black Sobrani cigarettes from Europe. Madeline Scott Jones Mitchell, who was the first pottery teacher at Newcastle Technical College, TAFE, would often be at these parties. And the reason for the name, Madeline Scott Jones Mitchell, Madeline Scott was her maiden name. Jones she was married to a poet with the surname Jones, and then she remarried again, Mitchell. The dinners were always multiple courses. Mum would slave over a hot stove quite often. Because she worked full time, she would often be cooking during the week at night after she'd cooked our meals, and possibly even that we'd gone to bed. She'd be preparing things for a dinner party. She loved a lot of sort of exotic foods, exotic for the times. Remember, this is the 60s where meat and 2 veg was the norm for a lot of households. Mum would be making paellas and all Lebanese food, Asian foods, different foods from different parts of the world. I can remember one time she had a trial cook for this. She had a trial bake doing Bomb Alaska, a dessert. Apparently it's quite fiddly to do. She mastered it after the 2nd or 3rd attempt and had it all pat for the dinner party that it was going to be the featured dessert in. For the dinners, my sister Penny and I, Penny was 3 years older than me, we would get dressed up and we would be the wait staff. We would bring in dishes as they were ready. Mum would serve them up out in the kitchen and we would take them into the guests. We would top up glasses with sherry or cognac or in beer, whatever was being quaffed at the time. I can remember I had a blue tab collar shirt, which was the big thing at the time, and a Paisley bow tie, things you do. After dinner, the guests would all move to the lounge room where they would have coffees, and smoke their cigars, pipes, cigarettes, whatever, and sit and discuss things about the local art scene or what they were doing or what they saw as being the next big thing or whatever. When Madeline came, she would quite often bring her two youngest daughters. She had three daughters, Sian, Rhiannon and Ruth, but she would just bring the two younger ones. Sian was old enough to kind of look after herself and do things. Rhiannon and Ruth were good friends with my sister Penny, so they'd always get together and while the adults were all in the lounge room, we'd all be in Penny's bedroom, which was the biggest bedroom of the house. Quite often Joan Cairns would be there at the same time, and she would have her daughter, her younger daughter, she had two daughters, an older one and a younger one. She would bring her younger daughter, Margot, to these gatherings too, and being the little shrimp of a boy, Ruth was actually the same age as me, and I think Margot was too. But they kind of ganged up on the only boy, so I was quite often the butt of their jokes, which was a bit naughty of them, but it was just all part of growing up. I kind of liked it in a way sometimes because I had these three girls that were looking after me, so-called. Mum would say that to Penny, and then look after your brother. And they took that different ways at times. Mum actually thought of doing this as a commercial thing. She was a doctor's receptionist, but this is again 60s. Women's wages weren't real good. She was a single mum buying a house, and so it was very difficult for her. So her pottery, her screen printing, all that sort of thing was extra income. And she at one stage thought she might start hosting dinners commercially. She would kind of let it be known that she would host dinner parties for people that wanted to entertain guests with fine food and whatnot. But it never took off. She didn't get round to it. I think it was just going to end up being more of a hassle than it was going to be worth in terms of dollars. As time went on and she got more involved with the Newcastle studio potters, they quite often had guest potters coming to give workshops. So it might be a weekend workshop, 2-day workshop, and the guest potter would be billeted somewhere. I don't know that we ever billeted anyone, but Mum used to quite often host a dinner party for them on the Saturday night. Various people from the studio potters would come along, and I can remember a couple of reasonably big name potters at the time coming along for that. Bernard Sam came for one, and Frederick Chapeau. Those two stand out in my mind because of kind of what happened, I suppose. Bernie Sam, poor old Bernie Sam, had a tummy bug and was making multiple trips to the toilet. And at the time, the fashion was those kind of high-waisted, wide waistband with multiple buttons and fly buttons. He had those on, and I can remember Mum, who was always very down to earth, she just said, "Bernie, just leave them open. Don't worry. Make it fast for when you need to go." And he laughed, of course, was embarrassed, but he laughed, and everybody else got a bit of a laugh out of it. And Frederick Chapeau, he was a bit of a rogue. He was flirting with everybody, and in particular, he was flirting pretty hard with Mum. And Mum had to, in the end, take a stance and say, "No, look, I'm not interested. Please stop." He was fine with it. Typical Gallic charm. Yes, he tried, didn't work, move on. Mum loved cooking all of her life. She kept cooking all the time. She kept trying new things. She went to a couple of workshops with well-known chefs. One was down in Sydney. She went to a few things in Newcastle where they had different people from different restaurants giving like a demonstration or a workshop where they actually cooked as well. If we went to Sydney, and sometimes Mum would come, I would go down with Mum, or Mum would come with me, whichever way around you want to look at it, and we'd go to galleries and have a look at exhibitions, pottery exhibitions mostly. We would always go to Cleveland Street to the Lebanese restaurants, or we'd go to Chinatown to the more authentic Chinese restaurants. When she went into care, that was one of the things that she really missed, being able to cook for herself. It was a bit of a not so good thing with the facility that she was at. they had actually advertised in their brochure cooking, that the residents would be able to cook every now and again in the commercial kitchen that they had there. And Mum thought that'd be great. They had quite a few different ethnic groups in the population there. Theoretically, what was going to happen was that some of the people from the ethnic groups, some of their relatives and that, would come in and give a thing talking about cooking for that nationality, and the residents could take part in that. They could book in to take part in that, but it didn't happen, which disappointed Mum greatly. The sad thing was that it was actually cooking that landed her in care. She was cooking for herself in her late 80s. She turned from the fridge to a bench to put a heavy casserole dish down with some food that she was preparing, and she had a fall and broke the top of her femur, and she had a lot of problems after that. But yeah, really fun memories. This bohemian sort of group of women. There's a group that had the Low Show, it was called, and it was a group of Newcastle artists, and Mum's older sister, Betty, who was a sculptor, was part of that. And they exhibited their work as a group of women artists. So it was an interesting upbringing. Quite a few of my friends sort of, though their upbringing was very different, they half envied it. They used to say, geez, your mum's interesting, isn't she, John? She's not like my mum. And very, very true. I had a slightly different upbringing to everybody else that was in my friendship circle anyway. That's it for today.